Remember, a scant 5 years ago, we were told that a certain non-politician, once he rose to the highest office in the land, would be a cowboy, would be a warmonger like the late, great Ronald Reagan. What is the reality about Donald Trump's foreign policy and national security policy? What did he do to fix the global situation? And how bad is it now in just the first 3 months of the Biden administration? Well, let's go back in time. Let's remind the world of what happened prior to that non-politician, my old boss, Donald Trump, becoming the president. Well, Al-Qaeda wasn't the story of the day. Instead, it was the rise of ISIS, a threat group that outstripped Al-Qaeda in terms of its lethality, the deadliest insurgency the world had ever seen, an insurgency that actually managed to capture territory in multiple countries of the Middle East and even affiliates in countries as far away as Nigeria. On top of that, they inspired attacks in the United States, and they filled the world's media with those horrific images of those orange jumpsuit-clad hostages, whether they were Christians on the shores of the sea about to be beheaded or whether they were US citizens and reporters. That happened as a result of the precipitous withdrawal of our forces from where? From Iraq under Obama. With regards to the region, it wasn't just Iraq. It was Syria, a nation that fell into a civil war that brought death and destruction to minorities in the region day after day after day. On top of that, it wasn't just the Middle East, it was Europe. Breaking a 70-year-long taboo, the Russian Federation decided this is a great time. Obama is the president, so we're going to invade a neighboring nation, the Ukraine, and just take its territory for ourselves. That hadn't been seen since Hitler and World War II. On top of that, we saw Iran remilitarized, not just in a sense of a rogue nation, but a nation that managed to pull and exert such pressure on the United States that Obama gave in to the disastrous JCPOA or so-called Iran deal, where more than $100 billion were released to the murderous mullahs in Iran, and we actually sent pallets of cash, taxpayer money, to the regime, which even the then US Secretary of State admitted would be used to finance terrorist attacks. I could go on and on and on. I could mention the missile launches by Little Kim in North Korea across the Sea of Japan, threatening our friends and our partners in the Asia-Pacific region. But I only have an hour. Let's just say one thing. When Obama went on his apology tour at the beginning of his administration, saying to the world, we are the problem, America is the problem, and we're going to withdraw from the global scene, what did it result in? As you just heard, a world on fire. Then a man who had been ridiculed by the quote-unquote elite, made fun of not just by his enemies in the Democrat establishment or the mainstream lying legacy media, but also by the establishment Republican Party. Well, he wiped the floor not only with the 16 establishment candidates from the Republican Party, he trounced Hillary Clinton to become the 45th President of the United States, and I was honored to serve in his White House. What was the reality of that 4 years? Was he a cowboy? Did he start wars? Well, on the contrary, what happened? He actually reached out to Little Kim. Through the power of his tweets, he threatened the hermit regime in North Korea. he met with Kim and actually brokered a peace deal, a deal to stabilize the region with that historic summit in Shanghai. One of the first things we did when we came in the White House was to also deal with the deadly global threat of ISIS. Something that Obama had told us originally was just the JV team. Do you remember that? The junior varsity team that had grown into the largest insurgency of the modern age. Well, we refused to accept what Obama had left us. He eventually said that this JV team as was a threat that now we just had to get used to. Obama called it a generational threat. You can't do anything with it, just suck it up. Well, Donald Trump had a different idea. When we came into the White House, he said to the lawyers, sit down in the Pentagon. It's time to fight. It's time to unleash our military. And he declared war on the physical caliphate of ISIS. And within 5 months, it was gone. It was destroyed. That's leadership. That's Donald Trump. After that, he decided to deal with other areas of the world. He managed to stabilize the Middle East. He managed also to do what? To deal with the Syrian regime, the murderous regime of Bashar al-Assad, which was about to use chemical weapons when I was in the White House. And trust me, I saw the intelligence about what he was going to do against civilians. And Donald Trump took a decision. He said, I'm not an interventionist. We've had enough dumb wars, but you don't get to launch chemical weapons against civilians. And he launched a Tomahawk attack, 50 Tomahawks against that Air Force facility in Syria to send a very clear message. And one of the most delightful things about it, and this is, who Donald Trump is, he was in the midst of a state dinner with Xi Jinping, the premier of communist China, and over the chocolate cake, he said to Xi, I just thought I should inform you that I've just launched a cruise missile attack against Syria to take out those chemical weapons. Sending a certain message, not just to Bashar al-Assad, but to all dictators around the world who think that they can behave with impunity and target civilians. Let's go back to Europe, where that taboo had been broken by Russia. After Russia invaded the state of Ukraine, took Crimea for itself, what did Obama do? This isn't a joke. If you don't believe me, look it up for yourself. The Obama regime, in an example of its feckless cowardice, sent blankets. Yes, blankets and socks to Kiev to help them with the next Russian invasion. What did we do? We didn't deploy US troops because that's not who Donald Trump is. But we said what happened to you guys is wrong. You're an independent country. So we shipped them anti-tank Javelin missiles. The thing that could make the Russians afraid the next time they invade, that the Ukrainians would deploy those anti-tank weapons against their troops. On top of that, we sent a very powerful message directly to that former KGB colonel in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin. When he deployed hundreds of so-called contractors to Syria, who weren't contractors, they were just Russian military who had taken off their official uniforms and become so-called contractors, President Trump gave the green light to take out those mercenaries. And the Defense Department killed more than 200 of them. So instead of colluding with Russia, as the lying legacy media and Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi would have you believe, we stood up to Russia and we killed Russian troops, the first president to do so in almost a century. What about now? In addition to getting our allies in NATO to pay fair share, the world was stable, finally, because we had a leader. That all changed 3 months ago when Obama's former vice president became, sadly, the new commander-in-chief. Biden has once again ignited instability around the world. And if you want to know how bad it is, just listen to Communist China's chief diplomat telling our chief diplomat on US soil at the recent Anchorage summit in Alaska just what China, our greatest threat, thinks of America under Biden.
必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
Communists lecturing us that we are no longer strong. That's because of Biden and that beta male Blinken, the Secretary of State. Last few days, we've seen what? Gas lines on the eastern seaboard, a Russian cyber attack against 43% of our energy supply to 17 different states. We've seen Russia amass troops again on the Ukrainian border. We've seen China threatening Taiwan. We've seen Iran demanding a re-entry to the Obama-era JCPOA Iran deal. And we've seen thousands, literally thousands of rockets fired by Hamas onto our closest friend and ally in the Middle East, Israel. That's just 3 months. Jimmy Carter had 4 years, but that's how feckless and cowardly this administration is perceived to be and is in reality. How can it last, and ultimately how much damage will it do to the safety of all Americans?
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.